The Durham investigation continues to heat up. Today, we're going to take a look at a new filing in the case against Michael Sussmann, a former lawyer for the DNC, really Perkins Coie, that reveals that Hillary Clinton and the Clinton campaign were spying on Donald Trump, not just his apartment building, but also the executive office of the presidency. Absolutely horrendous. Donald Trump had been hinting at this for some time, and the corruption just continues to abound. Let's take a look at this motion. You can see this was filed on February 11th out of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia there in DC. We can see it involves several people. Of course, Durham is the special prosecutor who is bringing the case against Michael Sussmann. And you'll notice it's kind of an interesting motion because it says it's the government's motion to inquire about a conflict of interest. And you start to say, well, wait a minute. Well, what does that have to do with anything? We've seen this pop up in other cases on this channel. We do a live show, of course. We'd love it if you subscribed. And so this is a conflict of interest question about this law firm, Latham and Watkins. And so it's saying here that this guy, Michael Sussmann, who has been charged with the crime, long story short, lying to the FBI, saying that I have very powerful information that you need to know, but not really being honest about where that information came from. And so that's lying to the government. And so he got charged with the crime. Durham is prosecuting him. He hired this law firm called Latham and Watkins to represent him. But there's a problem. Latham and Watkins has represented some other people who are sort of caught up in this whole thing. And so let's take a look and see if we can break down what is happening here. The government saying here that judge, court, we need to determine whether there is a conflict of interest here, whether this law firm can adequately represent Michael Sussmann, the defendant who's been charged with the crime. And so they're submitting this, and they're going to be giving us a little bit more detail about sort of the problem. They're saying, as set forth in further detail, there might be possible conflicts of interest that could arise. We've got the law firm Latham and Watkins. They previously represented other people in the special counsel's investigations whose interests may conflict with the defendant. Okay, so if we back up over here, what happens if Latham is now representing, let's say, this third party here, and so they've got obligations to this third party or second party, and they've also got obligations to Mr. Sussmann. And so what happens now if there's a conflict? What happens if Michael Sussmann says, oh, no, they're the ones who are guilty, and this party number 2 or party number 3 says, no, Michael Sussmann? Well, now they've got the same law firm representing both of them, and so there's a conflict there. What does the law firm have to do? Well, it basically get off both cases, long story short. And so the government is saying we have to tease out what's happening here, saying that there's been previous representation. We got to make sure we're maintaining professional relationships, or they actually maintain professional relationships that might be problematic. And so they're asking the court to dig into this. And before we get to this conflict, of course, the government's going to have to detail for us a lot of background factual information. Here's what that sounds like. Michael Sussmann, of course, is the defendant. There's a 1-count indictment where he is being charged with making materially false statements to the FBI. Lied to the FBI. What happened September 19, 2016, right before the election, less than 2 months before the election, the defendant, a lawyer at a large firm, we're going to learn who that firm is on the next slide, that firm was representing the Clinton campaign. Michael Sussmann goes and meets with the FBI. He goes to DC, sits down with them. He's got these white papers, and he says, FBI, look, I've got these documents, and these documents show that there is a covert communications channel between Donald Trump and Russian Bank One, which, as we're going to see, is Alpha Bank, saying that Trump is illegally communicating with these banks. The indictment alleges the defendant, Sussmann, lied in that meeting, lied to the FBI, stated to the general counsel that he was not bringing this information on behalf of any client. Turns out he was. Turns out he was doing it for 2 people, one of whom was Hillary Clinton. In fact, the defendant had assembled and conveyed the allegations to the FBI on at least 2 specific clients' behalf. One, tech executive number 1, a US-based internet company, which we're going to review, and number 2, the Clinton campaign. You can see that here. And so what is happening here? Let's start a new slide with a diagram. We've got the FBI general counsel. They're saying this is where this all started. There was a meeting where Michael Sussmann lied. lied to the FBI, said, well, we've got this information that Donald Trump is illegally communicating with these Russians over at Alpha Bank. And so right now, the FBI is sitting here believing that this is it, right? It's just Michael Sussmann, just a real nice guy who's just bringing us this information. That's the extent of it. They say, do you have any conflicts of interest? Is this information reliable? Can you authenticate it? Blah, blah, blah. He says, yep, it's just me. Turns out that's not true. Sussmann is a lawyer over at Perkins Coie. Perkins Coie is working with this guy, Rodney Joffrey, who is tech executive number 1. He is running a DNS company. We're going to learn a little bit more about that in a second. Michael Sussmann is also representing, through Perkins Coie, Hillary Clinton. Perkins Coie is the law firm for her campaign, or one of them. We also have Mark Elias, who is the chief liaison, basically legal counsel for Hillary Clinton, who at that time is also working for Perkins Coie. So Michael Sussmann's working for Coie. Hillary Clinton has a relationship with Coie. Rodney Joffrey has a relationship with Coie. All of these people are working to stop Donald Trump, essentially. And so as we're going to learn, there was a lot of activity involved with Perkins Coie, with an organization called Fusion GPS, which was hired by Perkins Coie, which helped create this Steele dossier, which created a whole new set of allegations and was used as justification in order to get certain actions done through the legal process. And so you can see a lot of activity here. In fact, it was not just Michael Sussmann going to the FBI. He was doing this on behalf of his law firm and many other people involved. There was a big sort of scheme, a conspiracy to go after Donald Trump. Paragraph 3 from this new filing says, the defendant's billing records. Okay, so Michael Sussmann here is the defendant. He repeatedly billed the Clinton campaign. Okay, so as he was going to the FBI and reporting all of this, he's going back and sending a bill to Hillary. He's saying, well, I spent 3 hours on this. I drafted this up. I went over there. You got to pay me for all this work, right? Hourly billing. And so he's explaining in there, I'm actually going over to the FBI and talking about Russian Bank 1, which as we know now is Alpha Bank. In compiling and disseminating these allegations, the defendant and tech executive number 1 also met and communicated with another law partner at law firm 1 who was serving as general counsel to the Clinton campaign. That is Mark Elias, campaign lawyer 1. So now we can see that Sussmann, who works for Perkins Coie at the time, is also working with Mark Elias, who's serving as general counsel to Hillary. And so the chain is just being fleshed out, we can see. This information is terrible. It's extremely biased because it is being proffered forward directly on behalf of an oppositional campaign. Paragraph 4 says, the indictment against Sussmann also says that beginning in July 2016, tech executive number 1, this guy, Joffrey, had worked with the defendant, which is Sussmann, and a U.S. investigative firm retained by law firm 1. Okay, that is Fusion GPS. This is a tech company. So Joffrey, Fusion GPS was hired by Perkins Coie, which is where the lawyers were working. We had cyber researchers. We had employees at multiple internet companies. They assembled purported data and white papers. Multiple people gathering all of this data. In connection with these efforts, Joffrey, tech exec number 1, exploited his access to non-public and proprietary internet data. Okay, stuff that is not regularly available. You cannot go and find this information. He's in a position of power. He's got access to privileged data, and he's going to be using it against his political opponents. Tech executive number 1 enlisted the assistance of researchers at a U.S.-based university. The U.S.-based university were gobbling up internet data. Why? They had a cybersecurity contract with the federal government, using government funds to go gobble up data. They have a contract with a U.S.-based university giving them sensitive data. Tech executive number 1 goes through this contract and asks these researchers to, quote, mine internet data, to, quote, establish an inference and create a narrative tying then candidate Trump to Russia. We're going to use our extra computing power and access to invent an inference and a narrative. In doing so, executive number 1, Joffrey, said that he was seeking to please certain, quote, VIPs, referring to individuals at Perkins Coie Law Firm 1 and the Clinton campaign. Okay, so Rodney is just somebody who just wants to go to the cocktail parties. Really excited about, eliminating Donald Trump, the menace to the world, blah, blah, blah. So he's willing to just sort of, violate privacy rights and work to expel his political opponents in America using nefarious means. Strange. So we can see, who is Rodney Joffrey and why is this so important? I want to pause for a minute and talk about something called DNS. It's the Domain Name System, I believe is the name of it. And we're not going to go deep technical on this, but it's important to understand what's happening here before we see exactly how Hillary Clinton and Joffrey and Mark Elias and Sussmann and many others, a part of this anti-Trump cabal, were exploiting the internet and their power and their privilege in order to eliminate their opponent. Here is a quick diagram. So here we have a browser called Firefox. This is just an example of something that you might have on your laptop. You've got a computer here, and you, as a human being, you type in example.com. When you go to a website, you type in, Google, or you type in, YouTube, or you type in, any website you want to go to. But that's not how the internet works. The internet works with numbers, right? We got IP addresses, and they look like this. And so what DNS does is it is a translation device. You send over Amazon.com, it sends back the actual web address that the computer understands, because we don't understand and memorize these numbers. And so it translates it. It's like Google Translate. And then your computer says, okay, I see. I need to go to 12.45.56.67 if I want to get to example.com. And so then your computer will send you over to the actual address, and then your computer will set up a conversation with the web server. Got it? Pretty simple stuff. And so now we can see what was happening with Donald Trump. Well, that guy, Joffrey, tech exec number 1, and the rest of the Clinton campaign were accessing this portion of the transfer. They were able to commandeer this data, this information. So basically anything coming out of certain locations, as we're going to see, were sort of being commandeered at the base layer. You can see all of the traffic because it's happening at such a fundamental level. It's catching everything. All right, so what's happening here? We've got Hillary Clinton, who is a Donald Trump opponent. In paragraph 5, we see the government is saying that their evidence is going to establish that they exploited the DNS internet system. And they were focusing on a couple different locations. One particular healthcare provider. So we want to see what is coming out and what is being translated there, and they're capturing all of that data. Number 2, shocking, Trump Tower. Okay, all of the data coming out of there. They want Donald Trump's Central Park West apartment building. You can see that here. And then the most shocking of all is the executive office of the President of the United States. Okay, he's president. Tech executive number 1, Internet Company 1, had come to access and maintain dedicated servers for the executive office of the presidency as part of a sensitive arrangement where it gives those DNS resolution services to the EOP. Okay, so Joffrey had an explicit contract to handle this and to handle it properly. And he exploited it. Tech executive number 1 and his associates exploited this arrangement by mining the DNS traffic and other data for the purpose of gathering derogatory information about Donald Trump. So if you can see all of the data, right, you can see, I wonder what websites he's going to. What's he looking for? He's looking for Putin's private bank account, and why is he looking for that every morning at 6 a.m.? Oh, that's interesting because he's Putin's puppet, as they continue to say, right? That's what they're trying to gather. And they're exploiting it in a way. They don't have permission to do that, presumably. Paragraph 6 tells us the indictment further details that on February 17th, after Trump is in office, the defendant provided an updated set of allegations. Okay, so Sussmann now is including information about a second problem now. He's talking about Yoda phones, as we're going to see. But Sussmann doesn't go to the FBI. He goes to the CIA, government agency number 2. Durham and these prosecutors say the government's evidence at trial is going to establish that these allegations that he is bringing to the CIA relied specifically on the data that they got from those buildings, from Trump Tower, from Trump's New York apartment, and from the president. executive office. So Sussmann is continuing to gather this stuff after he is the current president, and he comes with new data, and he says, we've got a new problem here. Rather than Alpha Bank, we've got him looking up Russian mobile phone providers. And if you look this up, this is a company called Yoda. So Sussmann says, okay, now he's all this data is going to these Russian cell phone providers. That's weird. And when he went to the to the CIA now at this point, he's in conjunction with other people, but he's not disclosing this allegedly. It's not saying that he's working with the Clinton campaign, still not saying that he's working with Joffrey or how he got this data. Presumably, we don't know the details of these conversations. But he goes and tells the CIA these things are very rare. They're Russian-made wireless phones, and they're in the vicinity of the White House. And so Donald Trump, as they're sort of trying to imply, is engaged in these nefarious conversations with, I guess, Russian agents outside the White House. Special counsel's office, through Durham, says identified no support for these allegations. Indeed, if you actually look at more complete DNS data, all of the records that they got from a company that assisted Joffrey, tech executive number 1, you can see that these DNS lookups were actually not even rare in the United States. So they just sort of gobbled up a bunch of data, snipped out a bit of it, and presented that little snippet to the CIA and to the FBI. When Durham and the government came and investigated this further, they said, this is not rare at all. If you look at the entire pizza pie, you'll see it's all over the place. And anybody who's done anything on the internet knows that, yeah, Russian bots are all over the place. If you look at your WordPress site, okay, there's a huge number of bots are coming from Russia. It's most likely just noise, but they are making it and recrafting it into this narrative. For example, says this motion, the more complete data that tech exec number 1 and his associates gathered, but did not provide to agency number 2, the CIA, reflected that for 3 years, there were more than 3 million lookups of those IP addresses that came from US. Fewer than 1,000 of those came from Trump Tower. Okay, so 1,000 out of 3 million. Got it. And they're saying this is a huge deal. This is Russian collusion or whatever narrative they're trying to proffer forward. In addition, the more complete data that was assembled by Joffrey and his associates reflected saying DNS lookups involving the executive office of the president began as early as at least 2014 during the Obama administration and years before Trump even took office. They didn't mention that at all. So now you expand the scope. Previously, okay, this guy, Joffrey's company, is doing the DNS lookup for the executive office of the president. It's been doing it for some time, but he's only focused on the Trump years. But if you look beyond that, towards the Obama years, yeah, you're going to see the same noise, right? The same activity. But he's not going to show you that. So he's sort of lying by omission in order to get the CIA and the FBI to do stuff. Paragraph 7 says, in his meeting with agency number 2, CIA, the defendant made very false statements as he did to the FBI general counsel, said that he was not representing any particular client in conveying these allegations. But he was. He was representing tech executive number 1, Joffrey, a fact that the defendant subsequently acknowledged under oath in December 2017 before Congress. Now, he didn't say his name back then, but he acknowledged he was talking to the FBI, talking to the CIA on behalf of other people. He wasn't like some nice whistleblower who was just blowing the whistle on Trump. And so this, as we can see, is where the conflict of interest problem comes into play. It says the main issue we can see that this goes on for several pages. We're just going to skip through most of it because you can see there is a potential for a conflict of interest. The government now wants the court to take a look at this. They say, look, Latham and Watkins represented other people. They represented law firm number 1, which is Perkins Coie. So Latham and Watkins actually represented Perkins Coie, where Sussmann was working. And they also represented campaign lawyer number 1, which is Mark Elias, who was also working at Perkins Coie. And so now what we have are problems, because what happens if Latham and Watkins has details about Mark Elias or about Perkins Coie from their representations that are adversarial to Sussmann? Okay, or what if Mark Elias says, hey, let's throw Sussmann under the bus and let me go free. And so now Latham they've got duties to multiple people. They've got duties to former clients. They've got duties to current clients. They've got duties to other people they may be currently representing. And if this investigation continues to spiral out of control, or I'm sorry, for them, sort of feels like it's been a long time coming from the Durham perspective. But from their perspective, what happens if additional, 5-10 additional indictments come out against Latham and Watkins clients? Well, now they have to make a decision about where their loyalties lie. That's a conflict. And so here the government is saying, look, we got to figure this out. From July 2020 all the way to July 21, Latham represented 3 separate clients: defendant, law firm 1, Perkins Coie, and campaign lawyer number 1, Mark Elias, all related to the special counsel investigation. And so we got to just make sure that they are properly apprised of what their individual rights are, making sure there is no conflict of interest. And so special counsel Durham is saying, Judge, for the foregoing reasons, we think you should inquire about potential conflicts of interest and let us know. You can see signed off on by Assistant Special Counsel, Special Prosecutors Andrew J. DeFilippis and Michael T. Kilty. And so John Durham continues forward with the investigation. A lot of interesting allegations in this motion. We see strong support showing that Hillary Clinton was actually spying on Donald Trump, not only in his personal residence, in his other sort of private properties, but also in the executive office of the presidency when he was president, concocting stories and narratives to try to take him out at the very beginning. And Donald Trump spent a lot of his time in office having to fight back against these claims and allegations. Turns out he was right the entire time. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more here, because this, I think, is just the tip of the iceberg. I hope you join us as we follow along. We have a live show that we do every weekday. I'd love it if you subscribed and hit that thumbs up before you got out of here. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.